Good morning. I hope you are not so tired the third day, and welcome to the food campus of the University of Barcelona. I am so sorry that Carmen Vidal present her excuses because she is not able to be here today, but she really loves this project. And I will explain a little bit. This is the food campus of the University of Barcelona. It's quite new. It was created 10 years ago. And you see, it's not in the central Barcelona because the politics of the University of Barcelona is to try to diversify the campus in the surrounding areas of Barcelona, not only in the center. This campus has 3 degrees. One is Science and Technology of Food, the other one is Nutrition, and the last one is Culinary Science. That I don't know if you know Ferran Adrià, of the Bulli. They have a laboratory here working with the culinary science. And our hope is to, in the future, to have a 4th degree with urban agriculture. But let's see if it's possible or not. Okay, today we will finish at lunch. And in this morning, we have a first presentation about the title, Rethinking the Concept and Practice of Edible Cities, that will moderate Ina. Thank you, Ina. You arrived, finally. I know it's not easy to arrive here in this campus. And then we will have a visit to the orchards that we are running here in the campus with an association of Santa Coloma de Gramenet. We are not in Barcelona now, we are in Santa Coloma de Gramenet. And there is an organization, Grama Impulse, that are working with people with some problems, and they are doing a very, very nice job in the orchard here, you will see. And then we will have a break, and then we will have 4 workshops, sorry. There is one workshop that will be held here, that is the one about health, let's say, the edible cities and the link with the health. The second one is about nature-based solutions and metabolism of the urban city. That will be held in the aula here, next here. There are posters in the aulas. And then there is another one about, I hope that Giuseppe and Kim arrives on time, but I think so. And is in the informatic aula in the 1st floor, and will be about the edible city game that is a deliverable, all the EdicityNet. And you will be playing, and the people that choose this workshop will be playing with the game of San Feliu. And the last one is the procurement session that is in the Aula 5 in the 2nd floor. Okay? After this, we come back here and we will have the closing ceremony, the closing remarks, and then we will have the lunch and goodbye. So thank you very much to be again in the University of Barcelona. I hope you enjoy. I am happy to be here also because I am also teaching here in this campus. There is the faculty that belongs to pharmacy, so I am teaching in pharmacy and in the science technology degree. So thank you very much, and please, Ina, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Antonina. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope you had a nice dinner yesterday and some nice field trips before, and enjoyed the trip here. So there are some people coming in. Welcome to you as well. So I'm happy to moderate this session. In this session, we want to reflect on the future of edible cities. We have mainly 2 talks, one here and one online, and then a more interactive reflection. We start with Filka. Filka Sekulova is here from the Open University of Catalunya, and she's part of the Urban Transformation and Global Change Lab, and she leads the project Cool Schools. And she will give us some insights on nature-based school making. And yeah, after the presentations, we will, different from yesterday, we will have a short question round. And then we go to the next talk. The floor is yours.
technologies with us this morning? Okay, this one. Okay. Do you hear me well? Good morning. Yeah. Just we need to keep distance from the microphones for the sake of your ears. Okay, yeah. So good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you, and I hope you enjoyed your 2 first days of the conference. I am here to speak to you about the kind of recent kind of a project from the ERANET Horizon 2020, which is focusing on the introduction of nature-based solutions in the urban schoolyards. And when preparing for this presentation, I just so far we were talking about things about naturalizing schoolyards, and I figure out that we need to start speaking about edible schoolyards and edible schoolscapes, right? Because kind of this project comes into a particular moment in, let's say, in European politics, but not only, when there is a big turn to rethink schoolyards, to think of schoolyards as, especially with the advancement of the climate change, when we figure out that the schools have on average 2 temperatures higher than the neighborhood level, and we figure out that kind of that's not particularly healthy and that's not particularly kind of inspiring atmosphere for young people to learn. So there is a kind of a bunch of projects in Barcelona, the Transformem and Refugi Climatics, for example, which are where the municipality are trying to push for deep pavement and bringing more diverse features, bringing in gardens, vegetations, but also kind of changing the type of infrastructure, putting more natural materials. This is happening in Paris, this is happening in Rotterdam, this is happening in Amsterdam, this is happening in Brussels, also in Germany, many places. So it's kind of its tendency. And so I'll pick this part of the project that are perhaps most relevant to the context of food and edible cities. But basically, the project is kind of transdisciplinary. We try to look at the way biodiversity changes after we transform schoolyard, the way that contributes to equity, where kind of poor neighborhoods could have more green, and actually that contributes somehow to reducing environmental justice. Some other colleagues are studying let's say, the health and cognitive development implications of transforming schoolyards. And we, the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, are working with with the governance of transforming schoolyards, which would basically mean we're studying how various actors jointly produce the schoolyard, meaning who participates more, what are the type of power relations that exist, whose visions of green schoolyards are being pushed further, what are the impacts and implications, what is the overall process of creating, what are the impacts. So what are the institutional arrangements around greening schoolyards and all that happens. And our work is mostly focused on Barcelona, in schools in Barcelona and in Brussels. But when perhaps I should take a little step here and say what do we mean by green? And because the concept of green in the schoolyard is not like, the idea is that this is green that opens space for creativity and exploration. That this is kind of, it's not, we don't imagine the green as a kind of very orderly, embellished, orchestrated squares, but rather squares that are places that are not only kind of with nicely ordered flowers, but where they have also the brown, the mud, the branches, the messiness, the kind of the biodiversity, because it also tunnels. Because actually, as I will argue a little bit further, these are the components that actually contribute much further to the development of kind of cognitive development and actually the emotional security of young people. So why is this? Why do we need to speak about that? And why do we need to renaturalize schoolyards? And why do we need to think about edible schoolscapes? For many reasons, actually. I'm increasingly fascinated of the multiple functions that greening schoolyards could have in a society. One aspect has to do with mental health. For example, when children in a situation of stress, they instinctively look for some sort of natural shelters or little pieces of the garden where there's not so many people, so they would go there and you would see how that acts as stress relief mechanisms. Also, it's the studies that are showing that there's kind of significant reduction in the level of depression as well when children can interact with nature landscapes around their schoolyards. There's also kind of experiments showing that after a walk through the garden or through the forest, children come back and score better in their attention capacity. They score better in terms of remembering particular information. So it's kind of for their mental health. It's kind of particularly positive. Also that, of course, when you have an environment in which you have, there is diversity of natural features, children and young people feel more relieved, and that reflects their physical well-being as well. Then, from a second perspective, for academic achievement, there is kind of increasing number of studies that show that memory and attention improve significantly when young people could be engaged in, let's say, observing and also kind of having nature-based classes or garden-based classes. So we figure out that when you have a landscape that's concrete and just like particular fixed features that cannot have multiple significations, the connotations and the creativity of that evokes are not so high. While if you, according to the theory of loose parts, if children and young people have a lot of branches and wild, let's say, flowers or little or kind of bushy elements to play with, that stimulates much more their creativity, their play, their capacity to learn their body and their capacity to actually expand their imagination and to interact by this interaction with this messiness in the nature. Then from social cohesion perspective, then especially in the US, there have been multiple experiments showing that the moment you introduce gardening in schoolyards, especially in, let's say, more marginalized neighborhoods, let's say bullying is significantly reduced, violence is reduced. Even the social cohesion between the interaction between the teachers and the students is also changing. It's producing, let's say, slightly more peaceful and harmonious environment. So that actually contributes very strongly to the entire ambience, especially in these neighborhoods where there were high level of violence and precarity and economic precarity. What else? Actually, what we've been finding here in Barcelona, that from the first round of naturalization and making schoolyards more edible, perhaps one of the biggest impact is in terms of gender. Why is that? Because so far, because girls have been traditionally systematically excluded from the paved areas that are dominated by playing with ball. And what happens is that we often can observe that they stay in the corners, observing others play. So what we notice in Barcelona is the moment the schoolyard has been transformed, and the moment children could have, let's say, spaces where they feel that they're theirs. The kind of girls start to feel more empowered, start to take more space. They work more in groups. They start to kind of engage in different type of play activities. So the roles of who takes how much space are changing significantly. So it's there is a significant gender impact from naturalizing schoolyards. Then from justice perspective, we know that certain particular type of the urban districts which are well off have relatively high level of greening than, let's say, poor neighborhoods, where there is normally high level of contamination, much less in poor quality parks. So one of the propositions is that from naturalizing and putting more gardens in schoolyards, that could contribute somehow to the high level of, let's say, economic, environmental injustice present in the urban environments. And of course, from climate adaptation, from biodiversity loss perspective. Of course, imagine if you sum up all the paved areas that are existing at the level of the city, that's hectares and hectares. If a big chunk of these hectares could be, let's say, transformed, depaved, planted, made more edible, that would have impact in terms of flood retention, in terms of permeability of space, in terms of reducing the heat island effect, in terms of connectivity in biodiversity terms. So the impacts could be significant, and this is starting to occur in a very timid speed, I would say, so far. And overall, from a sustainability transition perspective, kind of the more you transform urban schoolyards, and not only urban schoolyards, the more we are able to plant particular type of values around sustainability and participation in transition that would be helpful in the future development of young people. So, and to focus a little bit more on the issue of gardening, there is kind of very interesting experiment conducted in 2015 in the US, in Arkansas, Iowa, Washington, and New York. So Wells and colleagues created experiment taking 25 schools, which were kind of systematically provided with garden-based education and classes for a period of 2 years. And they had 24 other schools where they had the same classes, but not in the garden, just the indoors. What they found is actually, and they taught science, not only gardening, all type of other issues. So what happened is that those classes that were taking place in the gardens resulted in much higher scores in all these 20, among kind of all type of ages and gender, and all type of schools, than in comparison with the schools where all the classes were indoors. And also they found that the more classes were taking place in the gardens, the more heavy use of the garden they would take, teachers will be making, the better the scores, the better academic results. So basically, there is increasing scientific knowledge of the multiple benefits actually of introducing more nature in schoolyards, and actually edible nature also kind of in schoolyards. Also, from a psychological perspective, when children are given the kind of the opportunity to take care of gardens, that not only provides them with more knowledge, more scientific knowledge, but actually contributes to their sense of place. And when they feel connected with a place, that helps them kind of develop their self-identity, self-confidence, and relate somehow to the community. And which is kind of part of what education needs to be about, right? So what are we studying in Barcelona? A little bit, I'll just kind of provide some key insights which are related to our theme of the day. We're studying 5 schools in different parts of Barcelona, and 3 we're starting just now, that have been transformed, that have been naturalized in the kind of, let's say, in poor districts, in richer districts, and we're observing the process of naturalizing schoolyards in 2 other projects, simply because the municipality of Barcelona has positioned that, has kind of provided funding to naturalize and transform all schoolyards by year 2030. And so far they've transformed around 40 schoolyards, and there's a bunch more to go. But every year they're transforming about 16. So some schoolyards have been transformed some years ago, and others are in transformation now. So what we found is that although there is a lot of, let's say they receive about 250,000 per year for the transformation, so most of the funding seems to be going for, let's say, to an extent to deep pavement, but also to installation of, let's say, wooden playing capacity, playing elements. But there is relatively little investment and real demand for gardening so far, despite its kind of widespread benefits and the knowledge around it. Although many schools really opt for having these wooden jardineras, wooden pots for planting, and they would plant something, but that would be kind of very marginal. Well, one of the reasons for that, although all schools in Barcelona do have some form of urban garden, one of the reasons for that is our particular climate and the fact that the maintenance issues are not really sorted out, especially in the summer, especially because there is no agreement that the institutions that maintains the public parks could actually water the gardens and in the schools. So each school is looking for their particular configuration. They would ask the parents, they would find a private association that would help them, and there is still trying to resolve this conundrum. No, they know that having a garden would incredibly benefit their classes, the psychological development of the children. At the same time, there is kind of no funding and no personnel to kind of maintain. So this is the conundrum, and we're trying to resolve it and figure out how on earth can we do that. Also, there is kind of very interesting tension. I don't know what's happening in other parts of Europe between the sports department of the city and, let's say, the sports discipline let's say the more urban, the ecologia urbana, the urban ecology department within the municipality, the sports department, sport teacher are really strongly opposing to any type of deep pavement, and they're kind of arguing that Barcelona is a sports city, and so Barcelona kind of sports in Barcelona is very important. And Aras was saying, like with climate change and with ecological education, we need to push that further given what's happening. So there is a lot of tension there. So sometimes they would manage to get just 1 meter out of the 30 meter or 40 square meter or 90 square meter kind of playground, paved playground. So it's struggle. It's real struggle. It's not so easy. The idea that the schoolyards need to be paved and the idea that you can only play football in paved areas. So I mean, we're in a moment of changing discourse, a moment of a lot of friction, a lot of tension, but let's see what comes out. I mean, there's no real results, but it's just we're observing this type of governance conundrum over there. Perhaps one of the best examples that we've seen in Barcelona is the school of Jaume I. It's in Barcelona Sants, very close to a train station. That's a school that transformed the schoolyard without being part of the Barcelona program, but they somehow, with the help of parents, with the help of teachers, they managed to get some funding, much less funding than what the other schools were getting, and they managed to deep pave half of their surface. And they transformed it in little islands of edible and not edible, let's say permaculture-style bushes. You could see here. On one side you have the tomatoes, on the other side you have some mixed herbs and trees, and they have a little kind of a cabana, a little hut. So it's kind of the most, let's say, ambitious naturalization and making and transformation of edible into edible space, of school space. And you could see how immediately the biodiversity changed. There are a lot of butterflies, a lot of different type of species of birds. Children were spending a lot more time outside, and they were kind of very involved in the whole process of gardening. And that's kind of that's a process that a very committed community of school teachers and directors and parents pushed forward. Okay, and almost there. Another school, that's the school in the center of Barcelona, in Cervantes, close to El Borne. This is a school which doesn't have, the center of Barcelona is very compacted, so there you cannot really depave much. But you can install gardening pots on the top of the building. And the success around this example is that the director managed to find funding and employ a gardener just for a couple of hours each month. And this gardener is recuperating and plants from his other job and keeps bringing plants and plants and plants and keeps transforming this school into a little oasis with all type of recycled plants in a very kind of, let's say, wild way. And the school is really kind of looking, even though it's in the most dense part of Barcelona, for me it's one of the greenest schools that I've seen, even in kind of, let's say, more richer parts of Barcelona. So it's kind of, it all depends, on the dynamics and the dedication of the director. And just final point in terms of justice, and because let's say in the US context, there is one assessment of the school gardens, for example, in Portland. And while gardening seems to be kind of present in most of the kind of schools, it turns out that only schools that are in relatively privileged neighborhoods could afford having a gardener or maintenance costs, while schools in relatively deprived neighborhoods, which are the ones that need this type of gardens even more to deal with issue with social justice and violence, etc., are the ones that don't have the funding. So, and this is what we also find in Barcelona. For example, in Torre Baró or in Raval, the parents are dealing with issues of economic precarity, and they would never get involved. They don't have the capacity to get involved in gardening in their schools, while in others, like Eixample and Seria, the parents are, let's say, coming from more privileged position economically, and they could invest their time, they could volunteer, they could bring plants, they could have the capacity to raise funds. So the issue of environmental justice needs to be considered there. And I will just put it there, but I won't talk about that. Thanks. I'll leave it here.
Thank you. Thank you, Filka, for this interesting, inspiring talk. We have time for some few questions. Are there some? If not, I have one. I grew up in a country where school gardening is part of the curricula. Is there any part or any idea how to develop this systematically to involve also other topics like biology, like to use it also as a tool for education, for connecting with different science and.
Yeah, I don't have a very kind of detailed view of the let's say Spanish education system, but the issue that teachers are mostly confronted with is that even those teachers who have a little bit of knowledge how to bring this, let's say, biology in the garden, etc., this is not recognized by the official curriculums, because the official curriculums are about learning as much as possible, as fast as possible, and like a type of replicating the productivist mode based on growth that we have. So it's really reflected in the university, so in the university as well, in the schools. So there you could see how those teachers are really struggling, that their efforts are being recognized, that the kind of, so it's not an easy task. And for example, now as part of Transformem and Refugii Climatics, these kind of projects in Barcelona, they're providing training and environmental education to teachers. And some teachers are pushing more than others, but it's far from being institutionalized. And in terms of the way how these pedagogies could speak to each other, I perhaps need to ask one pedagogist or kind of a scientist. Yeah, but this is my observation, that is kind of, that current curriculum modes are very quantitative, based on learning and replicating, and numerical, kind of very quantitative as well. And that, for introducing gardening, we need to change the concept of, need to transform the educational concept that we have currently. So I'm very happy that you managed to have that. I'm sure that influenced you in doing what you do now. Yeah. Yeah.
Christine, maybe Christine and then Nienke. We have here the micro.
Yes, thank you. As part of the procurement project that I'm leading and inspired by EduCitNet, we have been trying to make our campus, university campus, more edible. We have kindergartens and we have students, and all your slide with all the good effects of this greening is really interesting. I really have a lot of, you have the silo organization that is giving us challenges, because I'm primarily working with the procurement department, and it's the department preoccupied with buildings, and they have, they are the ones that would have to make a decision on whether or not we would be allowed to grow some tomatoes, and even just using the where they normally grow the flowers. Mm-hmm. I was like, can we please grow some tomatoes or something edible? Is that possible? It's like, it's so hard. I mean, like, my God. Yeah. So it would be really nice to have the slides or exchange some, sure, have some advice, and maybe just show, if I just like send them the slides with the arguments on how much of value this is for different things. It's like you say, it's like we can't think that one measure could have several benefits. It's like always one measure, one benefit. It's like you're so limited in your way of thinking about how things can have value. Yeah. So it's like, I think we need to change the way we think about the world.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this is more of a comment, but I could send you the slides, and I tell you that kind of there is this constant tension on how we perceive parks and green areas, as there is kind of this heterodox understanding of that green areas need to have this particular type of order and flowers, while the benefits of having green areas looking much more wild, messy, the benefits of this messiness, incredible, not only for biodiversity, but for our development, for our kind of, I mean, there are studies that show that just the view of these types of messiness actually raises our capacity to focus, only for students, also for students and for high school students. They would compare high school students who have a view of, let's say, some sort of forest with lots of bushes, by accident, they're next to the forest, and others who have a kind of urban landscape, and you would see incredible difference in the way people are able to retain their attention. And yeah, so I'm happy to share any slides or information and papers. And yeah.
Thank you again. Nienke, a short question, because then we have to move on.
Yeah, it's a really short question. I like these insights a lot. We also work on green schoolyards in Rotterdam. And what we see is that the municipality and the schools, they really recognize like the biodiversity or the climate values, but all the other values, it's, I don't know, maybe you know why it's so difficult to, I mean, when you're in a school, you should know when kids can learn. And I think that's the main value of these green schoolyards, that you have a nicer stay when you're a kid in your school, you learn more easy, it's easier to make friends, etc. Yes. But the main thing that they see is the, climate and biodiversity. And of course it's also important, but I don't know, how could we get this clear? How could we get this message more clear? That's my question.
Yeah, this is mostly kind of what the school teachers are. But I think the school teachers need to speak out, because they observe it. They observe it completely. They see how when children and young people are stressed from, I don't know, from everything that they live, from our accelerated world, and they see the way this interaction with the plants calms them down. Actually, imagine a paved landscape where you don't have a way to interact with others, and when you have plants and little bushes, children or young people come together and it's easy to interact. It's kind of quiet environment to establish relations. So these spaces are more relational. And that's actually really found by pedagogists. And they need to speak out. But the Rotterdam crew that's moving ahead it's kind of pretty. I mean the IVM are really kind of pushing. IVN, yeah, they're kind of really pushing. They are really much aware of these values, as far as reading their publications, because they're part of the project, so it's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure that we will discuss this later in the break. We have a perfect link now to our next speaker. I'm happy to introduce to you Jess Halliday. She's online with us. She's from the RUAF Foundation, and some of you, of course, know Jess, and she will talk about the long game to introduce urban agriculture in unlikely communities. So we have a perfect link to the previous talk. Jess, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm sorry I can't be there in Barcelona in person. I'm just working out how I get my slides up. There we go. There they are. Perfect. So, yes, as Ina said, the title of my talk is The Long Game to Introduce Urban Agriculture in Unlikely Communities. By unlikely communities, I mean people in situations of severe food insecurity and malnutrition who are so marginalized and disempowered that establishing an urban agriculture program for their benefit would be extremely difficult indeed. I'm going to draw on some recent findings from a study in Dhaka in Bangladesh to make the case for a deep understanding of the intersectional factors that underlie these people's identities. So gender, but also factors like migration status, marital status, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc., and how these factors might prevent take-up of opportunities to get involved with urban agriculture. We really need this understanding before it's possible to even consider whether urban agriculture could be helpful or even possible. And then if the answers are yes, to start working towards removing the barriers. And it may take a considerable amount of time to remove those barriers. So a multitude of experiences from all around the globe have shown that urban agriculture projects can that provide the land, equipment, skills for low-income families to produce their own nutritious food can, in a variety of contexts, improve household food security as well as bringing other benefits, particularly economic empowerment as well in some cases. In Dhaka, urban agriculture has been practiced in urban and peri-urban pockets for many years, in spaces like riverbanks, beside lakes, on rooftops, in backyards, even on windowsills. For some of the urban poor, the ability to grow food has become a lifeline over the last 3 years since COVID-19 has affected access to traditional food sources. With the support of international organizations, the government of Bangladesh is promoting expanding take-up of urban agriculture in more communities that stand to benefit. So a good example is the Dhaka Food System project, which is co-run by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and Wageningen University. So about 1,050, mostly females, slum dwellers have received gardening and nutrition awareness training in a pilot program, urban gardening program by FAO and Wageningen during the pandemic. And this has been scaled up since August 2022 to over 5,000 urban and peri-urban households across all the 4 city corporations. In view of the lack of space within dense urban areas, the project has set up 20 rooftop demonstration urban agriculture plots, and it's now being scaled up to over 1,500 rooftop gardeners. The project has also convened experts in nutrition and food security, national and local government officials, and representatives of urban poor communities in seminars to showcase the role of urban gardening in reducing food and nutrition insecurity. And actually last December, Dhaka North City Corporation announced the possibility of introducing a 10% tax rebate for city residents who practice urban agriculture. So they're taking it really very seriously indeed. However, while this is undoubtedly really helpful and positive in these contexts, and I certainly don't want to detract from that, I'm going to take you to Badam, which is a peri-urban settlement in Ghazipur district in metropolitan Dhaka. Badam is a largely unplanned area. It's made up of both commercial and residential areas. There are six large ready-made garment factories, which are interspersed with smaller buildings that serve as residences both for locals and for migrant workers. The majority of ready-made garment workers in Badam are female migrants from faraway rural villages who've moved to Badam for a variety, very diverse reasons, including extreme poverty, family illness, debt, in some cases as an escape from social expectations like arranged marriage, and so on. Really, every case is different, but it's often distress migration. The ready-made garment industry in Bangladesh has been credited with enabling women's economic empowerment. The women workers in Badam earn between roughly $77 and $125 a month. However, this isn't really enough. It's insufficient to purchase nutritious food for the whole month, as well as enabling these women to meet obligations like rent, which is at least 40% of their wages, and repayment of debts. Many of the women eat only small meals, and their diets lack diversity. The money doesn't stretch till the end of the month. They obtain credit from the shopkeepers. They often pay higher prices so they can defer payment, but they get lower quality food, and then they pay for it the next payday. Now, coming from rural areas, most of these women have prior experience of growing vegetables or keeping small livestock, or at least within their communities. But there are currently no urban agriculture projects in Badam for anyone, and certainly not for these most marginalized, disempowered, and food insecure people, the women factory workers. So Badam was the location of a recent study, which was led by the CGIAR International Water Management Institute, IMI, in which RUAF was a partner, which explored how gender norms and formal and informal governance of food, water, and environment combine to impact the livability for women ready-made garment workers. That is, by livability, we mean as suitable and safe living conditions for the community. So this involved 3 field researchers, 2 women and 1 man, who lived among the workers for 5 months to gain a rapport with and an understanding of the community and the issues that it faces through non-participant observation. The interviews were conducted with 20 women workers to understand their everyday experiences in the garment factories and in their community, and interviews with 8 of their husbands, interviews with 5 local non-migrant women who did not work in the garment factories, and also focus group discussions and conversational interviews with 20 community actors, including landlords, house managers, shopkeepers, restaurant owners, cleaners, waste pickers, community leaders. Now, what we found was that, in fact, introducing urban agriculture in Badam would be incredibly challenging. There are actually no public spaces for urban agriculture within the area, which is largely unplanned. What little vacant land is available is contaminated by waste or effluents from the factories, like the riverbanks, for example. The ready-made garment workers, they lack land tenure. They don't have physical space for growing food within their residences. They usually live in very small, one-room residences. They're often sharing a bathroom between multiple households. Often there are multiple family members who are all living within one room, in fact, due to the costs. And even for minimal space techniques of growing food, the permission of the landlord would be needed. The landlords really control sanitation, water. They're the go-to people for the residents, for their tenants, who have no other interaction with any other form of governance. They don't speak directly to the water suppliers or anybody, or the waste collection. It all goes through the landlord or the house managers. They seem to be quite satisfied, actually, with conditions which would otherwise be considered quite poor. So they don't tend to ask for improvements. And if they did, it's in some cases, it's not likely that they would manage to get improvements. So it's really very unlikely that the ready-made garment women workers would take the initiative to advocate for the right to grow food, or have the capacity to keep livestock, or to demand the additional water for growing crops. So some other reasons. The workers are time poor. They work over 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. In addition to their factory work, they're responsible for all the domestic and care work, including preparing food for their husbands and other family members. They often get up to cook before 4 in the morning when there's gas supply to the residences for factory workers. Other times of the day, it goes to the wealthier parts of of Badam. It's very hard to imagine this woman would actually find any time at all for cultivating food. Given the demands on their time, these women have very little opportunity for social interaction with peers that might develop into collective initiatives to produce food. At the very most, they might sometimes share food with their neighbours or chat with colleagues on the shared challenges and situations on the way to the factory. The workers themselves hesitate to integrate with the local community. As they rely entirely on their landlords for basic services, they have little or no contact with other actors engaged in formal and informal governance of water, food and waste management. They're so disenfranchised that really their engagement in any peri-urban agriculture initiative would probably be inconceivable. So essentially, if you're going to try to encourage urban agriculture within this environment, Such are the intersectional factors affecting these women. They're migrants, low socioeconomic status, excluded from governance, disempowered from their societies and households, often with other issues going on within their families, such as debt or domestic abuse, and so on. It's just not going to help. Even if it were to get off the ground, it might end up adding to the workload. It would end up adding to the workload of women who are already experiencing the double burden of economic and domestic responsibilities. So this is where I feel there's a fine line to be trodden between non-imposition and creating opportunity. So no one, especially not a foreigner, wants to be the one coming in from the outside, telling people to do something they don't want to do, don't have time for, and which is not really appropriate to their situation. But on the other hand, we don't want to be writing off whole communities and telling them urban agriculture is not for you, when with some preparatory work, some people might actually stand to benefit. So there are undoubtedly communities where urban agriculture practitioners started off thinking, oh, it's not for the likes of us, or they face difficulties like childcare or land tenure or social constraints that actually were overcome with some concerted effort. So it really has to be a case-by-case judgment call. In the case of Badam, the lead researcher, Dr. Deepa Joshi, felt that the interventions at other food system nodes would actually be more effective in the short, medium term at addressing food and nutrition security. And this would be, for example, replicating or scaling up the on-site provision of nutritious meals for workers in factories. The workers have to pay for these meals, but still the food is there, that it's available, and there's support from local and international NGOs. Expanding or rerouting official government programs for mobile distribution of subsidized food to include the areas with high garment worker populations. Also building the awareness and capacity of local traders to assess food quality, and even potentially introducing quality checks that might have a positive impact on overall food quality, the overall quality of food that is available for these workers to buy. But what about if, hypothetically now, urban agriculture, NGOs or advocates came down on the other side in a challenging community and said, yes, it's difficult, but actually some people could benefit. In a place where the target community faced so many barriers stemming from intersectional factors, we'd be looking at a really long game. And this next bit, I'm not necessarily talking about Badam because the lead researcher wasn't sure that even in the long term, urban agriculture would be of a significant help, but perhaps in some other difficult contexts. So a first step would be to gauge feasibility, interest, and will by doing a follow-up study among various actors whose participation would be needed. And this includes targeting the participants, potential participants themselves, as well as landlords, the neighbours, some of whom might actually have some private land that they produce their own food on, business owners, employers, NGOs with a presence in the area, and local government. So you've got to start with the people and perhaps find ways to show them what urban agriculture could look like and what it could help with through demonstrations or pilot gardens, such as we saw with the Dhaka Food Systems project, rather than just talking about it. Show them, not just tell them. In such a study, it would shed light on which actors might feasibly be engaged to support establishment and engagement in urban agriculture for the benefit of the target community, as well as advocacy, capacity building, and funding needs. So then, bearing these findings in mind, some example preparatory interventions might be, for instance, funding for NGOs to work with target households, both women and men, to explore how they might participate in urban agriculture in culturally appropriate ways without imposing an additional burden on women. Advocating the introduction of formal planning, including designation of accessible areas of community food growing, using safe techniques to avoid contamination. Engaging local government departments and officials that have a remit relating to food and agriculture, and supporting the design of integrated interventions to support urban agriculture across policy areas, so in public health, in education, business and commerce, etc. and actively exploring with the landlords, as well as other local residents and stakeholders, how they might support urban agriculture projects and build connections across the social divides. So providing land, providing equipment, being prepared to offer access to water, to irrigation, and shared knowledge. Now, these ideas are very abstract. They haven't really been tested as such, and they would take a long time. It could take years, but such a study and then measures stemming from the findings might ultimately make for a more fertile ground, figuratively speaking, for the introduction and take up of urban agriculture at some point in the future. So I will leave it there.
Thank you, Jess. Nice insights, and I'm sure we have time for 2 short questions to Jess. Yeah, please take the microphone, because if not, it will be difficult for Jess to hear, to listen to the question.
Thanks so much for the presentation, all the insights, and yeah, I learned a lot. I remember at the beginning you said that many of the female migrants had come from rural backgrounds, rural situations, and I wanted to know if there's ever been examples where they're able to reconnect with the countryside and organize food to come in from the countryside to where they are living, so that there can be a connection between the countryside and the city, instead of trying to grow food in a really difficult context, but becoming protagonists in reconnecting countryside city and maybe having their own alternative food system in the process.
No, it's a really good question. The women almost all, in fact, all of them, I would say, have the ambition, they intend to go back to their villages. They move to Badam for it's a means to an end. They want to pay off debts or establish some money, start a business, or they all want to go back to their villages eventually. They go back to their villages when they can, often not more than once a year. And when they do bring food back with them to Badam, but it's a long journey. I mean, sometimes they can only get maybe 3 days off, and it's a whole day traveling to get back, and then they just have a day, and then a whole day traveling to come back to the city again. So, I mean, really, it's on a personal level. They would bring food for themselves, or maybe for their immediate colleagues with them when they come. But there's just not really the capacity for these women. They don't have that. They just wouldn't have the capacity, I think, to organize anything themselves in an organized way for this long-term flow of food. The food that does, I mean, the study didn't really look at the supply chains of where the food was coming from. That is available in the markets within Badam. I think it's mostly from the peri-urban areas. It's certainly not from so far afield as the women come from. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yes, I guess. One last question. The last one. There was another.
Yeah, not a question, but more an observation. I live in a suburban part of Amsterdam with very diverse population, where I can recognize many of the issues you're telling about Bangladesh workers. And it's very shameful that these undocumented people, for instance, there are in the same condition, that they have no access to land, and that there's planning restrictions for space, and difficult funding for the NGO that work with them. So there's a lot of work even to do in our Western countries.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jess. Hopefully next time you will be here physically with us to continue the discussions. Thank you for
Hopefully.
your inspiring talk and insights. Yeah, maybe you stay with us. We have another two speakers, which I would like to invite now to come here in front to the stage. I'm happy to introduce to you Alexandra Popartan and Joana Castellar, two postdoctoral researchers. Joana is from the Catalan Institute of Water Research from Girona, and Alexandra is from the Legia Institute, also from the University of Girona. And yeah, I hand it over to you, and I know it's not the traditional talk. We will get more involved in this interactive session. Yeah.
It's not on. So now you can. Hello. Hi there. I don't know how tired you are, all of you, because this is a little bit towards the end of a long and intensive days. So we have prepared something a little bit different for you. And we also thought, so something risky, but also a little less, you know, we thought, let's get rid of the PowerPoint presentation for once. So both Joana and I, we have been working for a few years in collaboration with Cost Action, which is a network of probably up to 600 researchers all around Europe, focused on circular economy. And not any type of circular economy, but one that tries to employ nature-based solutions to achieve these loops in our city. So you see, we are a lot of idealistic people who actually believe that circular economy is possible. Well, or at least we claim we do. So what we want to do here today with you is, first of all, to present the research that we have done during the pandemic years. We were all closed, locked down in our homes, and together with 80 experts, we organized some workshops because we were interested in understanding what are the barriers and the strategies to implement nature-based solutions for circular economy. So what came out of this research with about 80 experts, all of them locked down in their homes, as I was telling you, so they had a lot of time on their hands. We spent a lot of time breaking down these barriers and then finding strategies to overcome them. So what came out of it is that thing over there, and what we'll do by the end, when we're a bit time pressed, we'll try to play a little game with you. But first of all, I'll hand it to Joana to explain to you the tool we came up with.
Do you think it's necessary, the microphone? Yeah? Okay, so. Yeah. So basically, this is one of the results of our research, which is a tool that is under development still, but just so you have an idea of how complex is this topic. The inner circle, the blue dots, are 4 categories of nature-based solutions, which are rainwater management, water treatment, food and biomass production, and vertical greening and green roofs. And the yellow circle, it's all the solutions that are related to these categories, okay? We identified more or less 51 nature-based solutions. The green dots are the barriers that are linked to these specific solutions, and the orange dots are the related strategies to overcome such barriers. So this is basically a resume of all the work we did in these workshops with 8 experts. What is interesting here that I think it's our main value, added value, is that we also analyze this data in terms of how can we make this data also useful not just for academic purpose, but also for urban planners, for example. So in this sense, we identified which barriers are more transversal, what means which barriers are related to more different categories and different nature-based solutions. And in terms of strategies, we analyze which strategies are more transversal, which means which strategies are related to different categories of nature-based solutions, but also different barriers. So we calculate an index so people can see actually which barriers, which strategies can be used to mitigate a more wider range of barriers and also a wide range of typologies of nature-based solutions. Yes, I think that's the main findings for now. We are still working on this article. And the dynamic we will do, it's kind of, you'll receive a paper here. So you will see that we have two types of nature-based solutions. All of them are related to food production and biomass. We organize them in two different groups, solutions that are soil-bound, what means that it needs to be implemented on the ground, and other solutions that doesn't need to be implemented on the ground, such as bioponic, hydroponics, etc. So first part of the dynamic, you're going to have a couple minutes to think about strategies. You can think, barriers, first the problem, after the solution. So first you will think about which barriers you think that it's out there to implement this type of nature-based solutions for food production. And after that, we're going to do some interactive dynamic with you. So we give you a couple minutes to think about which barriers.
Don't worry, not everybody has to do it. Do you have a pencil? That's the first thing, it's the past century kind of a problem, barrier to the dynamic. Maybe think one or two. You have a couple of examples there. So let's say you want to think about, you want to implement this in your city, in your community. Why do you think there is a barrier?
No, para ti es mejor.
So surprisingly, everybody has something to write with. No? So it's good. So far, so good. One more minute. Okay, 2 seconds more, and I think we can start something that we. Okay, yeah, everybody's ready. So what we'll do is something that we called a bingo. Yeah, everybody. So the bingo goes like that. We have our barriers that came out from the conversations with the 80 experts from COST, and we want to see what some of yours will go. So first of all, we'll read one, barriers that we thought of, and then we'll see if they come out, if some of you have thought about it, and if not, we'll see what you have thought about it by the end of this. So first one.
So, do you want to take one barrier?
Second barrier. And read it all out. The first barrier on the ground.
Lack of political will and long-term commitment.
So lack of political will and long-term commitment with this nature-based solution. Anybody else thought about political will, long-term commitment? Yes? Hands up, anybody? How many? Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
We're going to check those at the end, yes? No cheating, please. And by the way, no prize at the end except for the knowledge and the good company. Okay, next barrier. I think it's better if we read it because otherwise the micro will take long.
So, functional and performance uncertainties.
Uncertainties about how these nature-based solutions work. So this is one of the top barriers we have found is that people actually, so the barrier to implementing more of this is that people don't know. Knowledge and, exactly, knowledge on the top of this. So who thought about uncertainty, lack of knowledge? Good. Oh, Jesus. So it is actually one of our tops. It seems that it is one of yours too. Let's finish this up. We actually have a lot of barriers, but we only chose today 5. Technological complexity, which is related in a way to this. So they are not only that we don't know, one technological person in the back. Thank you very much.
Is it similar to cost barriers?
They can be a cheap but complicated solution. Maybe we can think of one, right?
From those that identified this one, for which group of nature-based you put that barrier?
The soil.
The soil definitely, yes. The same as us. It's more perceived as complex, this type of nature-based solutions, the ones that are not soil-bound.
Okay, next one. So
Okay.
told you.
High land footprint.
Don't try this at home, okay?
High land footprint.
Highland footprint, okay? Thank you. For which one? The ones, again, more, the ones on the...
It requires a certain amount of space to be implemented, so it can be perceived as a barrier, mostly in cities that you have not so much space. Yes? Yeah, this is one of the biggest ones.
Too much space, right? Okay, good.
And this barrier was mostly related to soil-bound, differently than the before. Yes? So, tenemos tiempo para estrategias?
How are we time-wise?
7? Perfect.
So we have...
For strategies, no?
Okay, so now that you've thought in negative terms, we have a little bit of time for you to think of how we can overcome these barriers. Or not. Okay, let's go for it. So please take a couple of minutes for your barriers or the one that we have mentioned and think 1 or 2 strategies. What can we do to overcome them? 2 minutes. 1. And counting. Okay. Thank you. Homework done, almost. So the first strategy that we thought of to overcome, in our case, the uncertainty barrier, we thought, or our experts thought of stakeholders, collaboration, community involvement. Isn't that a fashionable strategy nowadays? Community involvement. Anybody else thought about community involvement or strategies related to stakeholders collaboration in this case? You. Related to what? To which barrier?
In a community garden, there is so much work by organizing with governance and municipalities that you almost have so less time to work in the garden. So that's a barrier, and I thought when you bring that back to a strategy, probably you can make a kind of structure that community gardens can help to overcome those bureaucratic systems.
Anybody? So next one, Joana.
So in terms of how we can address high land footprint, especially in densified cities. So one of the strategies that the experts identified was the use of neglected areas and vertical spaces. So anybody thought about that? Use of neglected, like abandoned areas. Sorry, it's my accent. You want to comment? Yes? No? Okay. So anybody thought about using maybe vertical spaces to implement nature-based solutions, or the use of abandoned areas? Yes? So now?
Are we running out of, we're running out of post-its here.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So we have more strategies. Okay, so information and dissemination to inform people. We related this strategy for reducing functional and performance uncertainties, and also to reduce the lack of political will and commitment. So it's important to inform all stakeholders involved, from politicians, citizens, practitioners, everyone needs to be informed. So anybody thought about information and dissemination? Nice.
Anybody wants to intervene if you want, because we have just a few minutes. Want to say something about it? No, yes? Any brave soul? No.
Actually, to finalize, despite the barriers we discussed before, did you thought about a different one that we didn't talk? A different barrier? Yeah?
Make it interesting economically to do the right thing and tax the wrong behavior.
Tax the rich is a good idea. I think you should give insight in the values. And then you can do this, what Kristen says. You give insight into the values that you have.
That's a nice one. Anybody else wants to intervene? Yes, please, Latifa. So this is, let's spend wisely these last 2 minutes.
Okay, so the two important barriers. One, it is about the soil independent nature-based solution. The sustainability of this solution are not always possible. For example, for hydroponic. And for soil-bound nature-based solution, one barrier, it is the availability of water. Okay.
Potentially resource intensive. They can be, depending on the design, they can demand more or less resources.
Always. Now we don't have water. They can be in area abundant, as you said, without no access to water. And it is important to have water available and to recycle, to rainwater harvesting, and all this.
That's a nice one. Thank you. Antonina, something more on barriers and strategies. Thank you.
Maybe about the soil, I think the soil is a key issue. The soil is really a key issue because of the agriculture and the contaminated, polluted soils, and also to find the right gravel or sand for nature-based solutions. Thank you. Another? Last one.
Please, last intervention, last chance. I told you there is no prize except you being able to go for the visit or the coffee break. I don't know what's next. So no. The visit, more work. So I think we can continue the conversation on how to implement nature-based solutions during the next step. No? During the... Perfect. Saved by the bell. Thank you.